Alright, hello, and welcome back. So for this video, I wanted to do something really spooky for the sake of Halloween. These stories are going to relate to the paranormal, and maybe some ghost hunting as well. But most of them are just going to consist of like really spooky stuff. If you're not a type of person who's really into like spooky stuff or like ghost stories, and if you get scared easily, I recommend you click off this video. But if you want to continue watching this video, then enjoy the 4 scary stories that I found off the internet. I hope you guys enjoy. Reader submission, a Ouija possession, posted on November 8th, 2014 by Ghost Ghoul. I've never believed in possessions. I still don't know if I do, but I had an experience that makes me wonder. It started when I was 8 years old. My older sister would always talk to the walls. I thought she was crazy. She would always talk to her and her friend Annabelle and would introduce me to air. I never saw anything but would usually play along. My doctors say it was a mental disorder, but my sister was perfectly normal otherwise. When I was about 15, my sister started using Ouija boards. I would watch her and her friends' sessions by sitting next to them, but I never had the courage to try it myself. I soon discovered who Annabelle was because she talked to my sister through the Ouija board. My whole family was creeped out. I remember one night waking up to my sister screaming in bed, tearing up her sheets. One day she licked her own urine off the floor. Some days she would go to the corner of the basement and eat spiders and tear out her hair. Her pupils would constantly dilate and her voice would change. She would never respond to her own name. She would just insist that she was a dog and howl. The doctors started giving my sister medicine to help with her quote-unquote disorder. But after a couple of months of strange behavior and her refusing to eat, my dad took her to an exorcist. I didn't go because I was too nervous. The exorcist claimed he got the demon out of my sister, but she passed away a couple days later. I don't know what possessed my sister or how long she was disturbed. I'm guessing it was Annabelle who finally got an entrance when my sister used the Ouija board. Or maybe she wasn't possessed at all. I don't really know, but I really do miss my sister. My true life story. My wife and I swear to it in front of any person on this planet. This is a post through Reddit. We lived in a fairly new double-wide mobile home that sits on a spot that has never had house of any kind and is at least a half mile from where any house has ever sat. So you would not think that it would be likely a location for a haunting. However, my wife and I have on occasion seen rather strange things there, the most startling of which I relate here. One night, after an uneventful day, my wife and I retired for the night. We sleep in a large waterbed. Some time has passed and I was unable to sleep. My wife's breathing had become regular and reached a point where I assumed she was asleep. It must be also known that we leave a light on in the bathroom farthest from our bedroom because we normally have children in the house. However, that night there was no one in the house except for my wife and I, but the light was on as usual, casting a glow through our open bedroom door which weakly lit it. While laying there unable to sleep, I became aware of a presence and suddenly and silently a figure moved through our bedroom door and proceeded to our bed. Then rounding the corner of our bed took up a fixed position at the front of our bed. I was aware that this entity was conscious of us and was intently watching us as we lay there. The entity can be best described as someone that had the appearance of a black smoke or a shadow. However, it was more material than either of those but less material than a real person. The most odd thing about this is my lack of fear. Although I was acutely aware of this being the fact that it was not of this earth as we perceive it, it did not seem to arouse any fear in response in me. I would say it arousing a feeling that would fit somewhere between creepy, odd, and curiosity, especially considering the fact that it was aware of me and I was aware of it. After some time, I've almost convinced myself that I was imagining it, but then I became aware of the fact that my wife was no longer breathing like she was asleep, but was breathing almost silently. I then said, "Honey, you awake?" To which she answered, "Yes." Then I said, "Do you see anything?" expecting her to reply with, "What do you mean?" But much to my surprise, she said, "You mean that thing standing at the foot of our bed?" At this time, I did become somewhat nervous. We laid there for about 10 minutes and then it was gone. It just over a period of about 10 seconds became less solid and our perception of its presence became weaker until it just wasn't there anymore. Then it was if it had never been there. Nothing like this has happened since the only evidence it ever existed is in my wife's and my memories of it. The Evil Doll, an article written by Anna North. My mother had a large Shirley Temple doll when she was little whose eyes she said followed her. Literally. She hated that doll, and it ended up buried somewhere only to resurface when I was much older. She would not tell me the rest of the story until I begged her, and made me promise not to ask my aunt about it, and to not mention it again after she told me. She gave the doll to my cousin. Why she did this, I can't imagine. She says she has convinced herself that she was imagining things as a child herself, but seriously? Anyway, my cousin is playing with the doll one day when my aunt comes in and finds the doll talking to my cousin, so she promptly freaks the fuck out and takes the doll away. My uncle buried it in pieces as it continued to laugh up a storm. That shit is evil. I asked my aunt about it against my mom's wishes, and she simply said, "I don't want to talk about it." This next ghost story came from Enderman295, who is actually a subscriber to me and helps me a lot on Xbox Live and through YouTube videos. He sent me this story because his college friend experienced this as a child, and he said that this was really scary and sent this to me via Discord. Around the age of 12, I was a more lively child, go outside, bounce on the trampoline, etc. Every day, I would always look out my window, seeing the trees gently swaying in the wind as the street in front of me. My family wasn't your average. My mom was a teacher at my local school, and my dad didn't exactly do much at all. I had a younger sister, who for the sake of privacy, I'll call her Belle. We would always play together inside. We would role play with dolls and such. One day, however, it went to chaos. I got up and began my usual routine when my mom came into my room. I could tell something was wrong. She wasn't her usual cheery self. Her face was filled with grim. "Mommy, what's wrong?" I asked her. She simply told me to go back to bed. I was confused at first before shrugging it off. Nothing much really happened that night. Well, aside from the night that played out before me. I was tugged in bed, getting to sleep, when I heard my mom's footsteps slowly making their way towards the door. I could see two rectangle-like shadows that blocked the light sources that came from under my door. My door opened and my mother stepped in. A chill was sent down my very spine. She was twitchy. Very, very twitchy. Her usual nightdress was shredded. Her head was facing down as her black hair covered her face. She slowly made her way towards me as she shook more and more violently. I covered my eyes, as I simply whimpered. I uncovered my eyes to see no one at all, aside from my mother. She asked me if I was okay. She said I looked like I saw a ghost. I told her what I saw, and her face went white with fear. She then told me the most frightening thing I've heard in years. She said, and I quote, "That was my grandmother, who had died 30 years ago." This last story isn't exactly a ghost story. It's more of an article and true facts from history and paranormal entities. Isle of Madness, Peleglia Island, is haunted by the ghosts of 116,000 plague victims, by Dana Matthews on October 25th, 2016. People often ask me what my dream haunted destination would be if I could go anywhere in the world to conduct a paranormal investigation. I've had the same answer for the past 15 years. The island of Peleglia in the northern Italy. Completely abandoned and isolated from the public, The island once served as a dumping ground for over 116,000 plague sufferers. Not everyone's idea of an ideal vacation, but for the ghost hunters who have visited the island, it's considered one of the most paranormally active locations in the world. Some visitors are so shaken by what they've experienced on Peleglia that they vow to never to return. For the sick who travel to Peleglia, the gondola ride to the island was a one-way ticket. No one ever got better on the island of Peleglia. The distance from the mainland meant that sufferers would not only be out of sight and out of mind, but a safe distance away from those who had yet to contract the Black Plague, the fatal disease that left its victims with pus-covered boils and rotting black tissue. For those who look carefully, there is still a number of plague pits littered all over the island. Giant graves where bodies were dumped quickly after death with the hopes of keeping disease from spreading to the doctors and nurses. The Black Death was easily one of the most destructive pandemics to have ever hit humankind, and resulted to the death tolls that may have reached as high as 200 million people, most of them in Europe, in the years of 1346 to 1353. It's long been thought that the plague was carried by oriental rat fleas living on the black rats that stowed away on merchant ships, though a relatively new theory states that gerbils may have been to blame. In the end, the Black Plague is thought to have killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population. To give you a morbidly visual idea about the number of people who died on the island of Peleglia, a long-standing rumor about the property is that the topsoil consists of nearly 50% of human ash. The island has never been properly investigated or excavated, so there's no real way to guess exactly how many people's remains are still there. However, judging by the island's monumentally dark past, we've only just yet begun to scratch the surface. As if having been the dumping ground for so many doomed souls wasn't enough, in the late 1800s, Italy again turned to the island of Peleglia for another dark purpose. With nowhere to house their mentally ill, the island was transformed into a makeshift asylum where the highly disturbed could be kept isolated from the mainland. As if out of a horror movie, rumors began to spread about the head doctor's twisted experiments, in which he allegedly been using the countless patients on the island as a human guinea pigs. By the 1930s, crippled by the guilt of his actions, the mad doctor committed suicide by throwing himself off the bell tower, which still stands at the entrance to the island today. According to locals, it's not uncommon to hear the sound of a bell chime echoing from the island late at night, even though it was removed many years ago. By the mid-1970s, the island and hospital has been completely abandoned, and the buildings began to slowly be taken back by nature. For obvious reasons, many of the mainlanders do not like to travel near the island. In fact, many of the local boat owners refuse to ferry curious thrill seekers to Peleglia, choosing to steer clear of the island that they believe wholeheartedly is cursed. Over the years, many people have visited Peleglia, have experienced some of the most intense paranormal activity ever reported. The overwhelming feeling of being watched tends to be the first indicator that something strange is about to happen to visitors, and shortly thereafter, ghost hunters begin to report being scratched by invisible entities, pushed into walls, and even chased by dissembled sounds of moaning that echoes across the island. Visitors have documented countless experiences with the island's ghosts, including the Mad Doctor, which is one of the most violent entities. Needless to say, Peleglia is not the faint of heart. In 2014, the island was sold to Italian businessman Luigi Bergnaro, and its future remains unclear. Though there has been no news about whether or not Bergnaro plans to restore Peleglia or turn it into a luxury resort. Seriously, don't people watch horror movies? The lease is good for 99 years, so we got some time to think about whether or not he wasn't to attempt to renovate the most haunted island on Earth. I'm sure that quite a few people might agree with me that I say that I believe Peleglia should be left alone. The island has seen so much death that has been at the center of human suffering that it almost seems disrespectful to turn it into a hotel or a resort. not to mention the sheer level of paranormal activity occurring on a daily basis. Which, as we know, is not everyone's cup of tea. Peleglia is a haunted island with a dark history that spans out across decades, literally seeping into a very soil that makes up the land. If you were to ask me to name a haunted place that could match Peleglia, I can promise that the list would be a very short one. Some places have seen so much death that they aren't suitable for the living anymore. And I truly believe that is true about Peleglia, the island of madness. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I'll see you guys next time.